This is the Olympus OMD EM10 Mk IV. The predecessor to this camera, the Mark III, was the top-selling camera in Japan in 2020. It weighs 383 grams, including the battery and a memory card, but excluding the eye cup. The body alone weighs 335 grams without the memory card, the battery, or the eye cup. It is 12.17 centimeters by 8.46 centimeters by 4.9 centimeters. The camera has an electronic viewfinder and tilt screen. You can configure the camera so that as soon as you put the electronic viewfinder against your eye, the tilt screen will switch off and the electronic viewfinder will turn on. You have the option to switch off this feature and do it manually instead. So there's a button right next to the eye cup which you can use when you want to switch it manually. The camera has a tilt screen which can flip down all the way, facing the front of the camera for taking selfies or recording yourself. So the tilt angle downwards goes as far as 180 degrees, and in the upward direction it can reach 80 degrees. The camera can be operated using the touch screen, which is particularly desirable when the screen has been flipped down to a selfie orientation. The advantage of this type of tilt screen in comparison to the screens which flip to the side are that when in selfie mode, with the screen flipped downwards 180 degrees, the eyes of the subject will be centered with the lens, so it looks like the subject is looking straight into the lens, which results in better pictures or video clips. Whereas on screens that flip to the side, the eyes of the subject will be pointing to the right, which looks like they are distracted by something happening to the right of the camera. Also, from the perspective of the camera operator, a tilt screen means that the screen is on axis with the lens, so it's easier to direct the camera accurately at the subject. When using a camera on a gimbal, a screen which flips to the side can get in the way of the gimbal rotating the camera, but with a tilt screen, the camera takes up less width, so it doesn't interfere with the rotation of the gimbal. The disadvantage of this type of screen is that if you want to mount the camera on a tripod to film yourself, the tripod will block the screen, so you would have to use a workaround to move the camera off axis from the tripod or mount the camera from the cold shoe on top. One tip for when using the screen to compose your photo: if you are doing flash photography, switch the live view boost on so that you can see the subject on the screen with reasonable brightness and frame your subject. Otherwise, the screen will attempt to replicate the existing exposure of your subject, which will be relatively dark considering the flash is not on yet. So this is particularly important for scenarios where you're using flash photography. Otherwise, it won't matter. The camera uses a BLS50 lithium-ion battery. This is the same battery used in its predecessor, as well as in the EM5 Mark III. You can charge the battery while it is in the camera using the micro USB connector. The camera comes with an adapter for USB charging, just like smartphones. The adapter provides 5 volts of power at 1.5 amps, which means it provides 7.5 watts of electricity to your camera. So since the camera supports USB charging, you can charge your camera using a power bank or smartphone charger, but check to make sure that it has the same voltage and provides at least the same 1.5 amps of current. The camera has to be off when it is charging, so you won't be able to use the camera while it is being charged. Even if the camera is turned off, the battery cannot be charged if pictures are being uploaded to a smartphone via Wi-Fi using the background auto upload feature. Olympus has this feature that allows pictures to be uploaded via Wi-Fi in the background. This continues in the background even if you switch off the camera. Under this circumstance, you won't be able to charge the camera until the background upload finishes or you disable this feature. You can turn this feature off to avoid background uploads of pictures through Wi-Fi, but then you could lose your photos if something happens to your camera or SD card and you haven't completed uploading your pictures. The LED light on the back indicates that the battery is being charged. It will turn off once the battery is fully charged. You can also charge the battery by using a charger, but the charger is not included when you buy the camera, so you have to purchase the charger separately. It might be worth buying the charger to avoid risking damage to the micro USB port from overuse. In terms of connectivity options, it has micro USB and micro HDMI ports on the right-hand side of the camera. It also has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The camera does not support Wi-Fi cards, which is something that the previous version of this camera supported, but this makes sense because the Wi-Fi product and associated services were discontinued in 2018. In case you haven't come across Wi-Fi cards, these were SD cards with Wi-Fi capabilities, so a device that did not have Wi-Fi but had an SD card slot could use Wi-Fi with these cards. The camera has a single SD card slot which supports UHS 2 SD cards as well as older UHS 1 SD cards. These are two different cards that I am using with this camera. This one is old and slow. I bought it in 2011. And this one is fast, which is useful if you're recording either high-speed video or 4K video. If you don't have a fast card, you can change the video setting to lower the video bitrate by selecting normal or fine instead of super fine, depending on the speed of your card. To record video, an SD card with a speed class of 10 is necessary, but to shoot 4K video or high-speed video, a UHS 1 or UHS 2 card with a UHS speed class of 3 is necessary. This is a list of compatible SD cards which Olympus provide on their website, but other SD cards that are not mentioned here will also work. The camera has a micro four thirds sensor with 20.3 effective megapixels. The full resolution of the sensor is 21.8 megapixels. This is not the same sensor which is used in the EM5 Mark III, EM1 Mark II, EM1 Mark III, and the EM1X, so the quality might not be as good as those higher-end cameras. It has a TruePic 8 processor. This is the same processor which is used in the EM5 Mark III, the EM1 Mark II, and the EM1X has two of these processors. It has a supersonic wave filter which helps remove dust on the sensor. The supersonic wave filter vibrates thousands of times per second to shake off dust or other particles on the sensor. And once they fall off, they fall onto an adhesive strip which stops them from making their way back onto the sensor or other parts of the camera. In 2004, Olympus announced the E300 camera which used this technology. And at that time, the supersonic wave filter would vibrate at 35,000 times per second. I don't have the numbers for the improvements made since then, but I assume it will have improved substantially since 2004. This is a video of the supersonic wave filter used on the EM1X, dislodging a water drop from the camera's sensor. It's also worth mentioning that Olympus dust reduction technology is known to be significantly better than the other brands. The camera has 5-axis in-body image stabilization with up to 4.5 stop of stabilization. The camera also has digital stabilization for use in movie mode. When digital stabilization is switched on in movie mode, there will be a slight crop to the size of the frame. I couldn't find an exact number for the crop factor. Regarding the crop factor, what is displayed on the screen is what will be recorded, so you won't need to change the framing after pressing record, and there won't be a difference in the recorded video. The reason I mention this is because I have come across some cameras that show a wider view on the screen, and once the recording starts, then the crop sets in, which makes it difficult to frame a scene. According to online reviews, Olympus currently has the best stabilization system in the camera market. The camera can take photos both in RAW and JPEG, or both at the same time. You can configure this. The JPEG setting has 3 options for size: large, medium, and small, as well as 3 options for the level of compression: superfine, fine, and normal. For the best quality photo, choose the large size option with superfine compression. This JPEG setting will consume the most amount of storage in comparison to the other JPEG settings, but not as much as the RAW file. The RAW setting does not have any options, as all data is captured from the camera sensor and will take up even more storage space than any of the JPEG options. I use the RAW plus JPEG option so that I can have the RAW image format for post-processing, but also the large superfine JPEG file for ease of use and sharing. Also, it is worth mentioning that if you are using art filters, the JPEG will have the effect applied to them, but not the RAW file. So if you have chosen to store both, you will be able to get the original picture content without the art filter applied to it from the RAW file. If you look at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you can see 2 numbers. The number on top represents how much video recording can be done with the current level of free space on the memory card. And the number on the bottom represents how many pictures can be taken with the current level of free space on the SD card. If you change the settings for the size and encoding of how images or videos are stored, then this number will change to reflect the required amount of storage. So you can see as we move between the available options for photos, this number goes up or down depending on the amount of required storage. The camera has a base ISO of 200, but can go lower to a setting almost equivalent to ISO 100, and it can go up to ISO 25600, which is adjustable in 1/3 increments. The camera has highlight spot metering and shadow spot metering to make it easier to get the correct exposure for your pictures. Highlight spot metering has the same effect as increasing the exposure compensation by 1 stop when using spot metering. And shadow spot metering has the same effect as reducing the exposure compensation by 1 stop when using spot metering. These 2 metering modes are essentially an abstraction on top of spot metering to make it easier and quicker to change the settings without changing the exposure compensation. The camera uses contrast detect autofocus with 121 focus points. It uses the same contrast detect autofocus algorithm used in the Olympus flagship cameras such as the EM10X and EM10 Mk IV. There are a few options you can use to autofocus. It has a single autofocus, so you can press the shutter halfway down while the focus point is on your subject and the camera locks focus. Then you press the shutter all the way down and a photo is taken. It also has continuous autofocus, which lets you continuously focus on the subject as long as the shutter button is halfway down until you decide to take a photo and press the shutter fully. It also has an option for a combination of single autofocus with manual adjustment, whereby you press the shutter halfway to focus on your subject, then turn the focus ring on the lens using your hands to further adjust the focus manually. In still picture modes, you can choose the size of the focus point as well as the location of it, whereas in video mode, you cannot change the size of the focus point. The camera has focus tracking, which locks on the subject and follows it, refocusing between shots. This feature is even more useful when recording video to keep the subject in focus. The camera also has face priority and eye priority autofocus. So the focus will be kept on the face and the camera will focus on the eye which is closest to the camera. This is also very useful in video mode. When face priority or eye priority is used in conjunction with the default metering mode, which is called digital ESP metering on the Olympus cameras, exposure will be weighted according to the value measured for the face, which means not only will the correct subject have focus, but its exposure will also be correct. The camera has an LED in front, which helps with the autofocus feature in low light situations. You can turn this off in the settings. The camera has a focus peaking feature, and the color of the focus area can be chosen. So if the subject has a lot of red, then you can change the focus peaking color to a different color like yellow or black. The camera has three shutter types: mechanical shutter, anti-shock mechanical shutter, and silent electronic shutter. The mechanical shutter speed ranges between 1/4000th of a second all the way up to 60 seconds in increments of 1/3 stops. The electronic shutter can shoot from 1/16,000th of a second up to 60 seconds. For speeds over 1/320th of a second, the mechanical shutter will automatically be selected by default in the automatic mode. The reason for this is that you may experience some rolling shutter effects when using the silent electronic shutter to photograph fast-moving objects, in which case a mechanical shutter is likely to be the preferred option. The camera has a silent mode, which disables all camera sounds. It will use the electronic shutter and by default turn off the autofocus illumination LED and the flash. You can change the behavior for silent mode to choose whether flash and autofocus assist LED should be switched off or not in this mode, as well as the camera beeps. In bulb mode, the shutter speed can go up to 30 minutes. The camera allows you to do long exposure photography with the various bulb options, which also allows you to see updates in near real time on the screen. The camera doesn't have a dedicated bulb mode on the mode dial, but you can access the feature in the other modes either through the menu button or the shortcut button. The anti-shock mechanical shutter option reduces camera shake caused by the movement of the mechanical shutter. So if you want to take a really high quality image with a slow shutter speed, this might be something that you want to enable. The camera has three shooting speeds: single shot, which means you have to press the shutter button once for every photo you want to take; high speed shooting, which means you can hold down the shutter button and the camera will continue to take photos as fast as it can without changing the focus, exposure, and white balance after the first shot. So focus, exposure, and white balance are locked at the first frame. Using the mechanical shutter, the camera is able to take 8.7 frames per second in high speed mode, and with an electronic shutter, it can take 15 frames per second. And finally, a low speed option, which means the camera will continue to take pictures as long as the shutter button is held down, but the camera will adjust focus, exposure, and white balance in between shots. Hence, it will be slower than the high speed mode. With this shooting speed, focus and exposure is fixed based on your autofocus and exposure modes, which you can change. Using the low speed shooting option, the camera can shoot about 5 frames per second. In the first version of this camera, you could change the settings for the number of frames taken at each of the sequential shooting modes. That option no longer exists in the Mark IV. It is worth mentioning here that the memory card you use can have an impact on how fast you continue to shoot at the maximum rate and write the images to storage. If the memory card being used is slow, then the buffer needs to be cleared, so the shooting speed might be reduced. The camera can automatically detect flicker and adjust accordingly, or you can manually set it to 50 Hz or 60 Hz, depending on the power supplies of the shoot location. The camera can shoot video both when the camera is in movie mode as well as when the camera is one of the still picture modes using the record button on top. It lets you shoot 4K video at 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, and 30 frames per second. This is recorded internally in IPB compression with a bit rate of around 102 megabits per second for the 4K 30 frames per second option. You can shoot 1080p video at 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60 frames per second. It can shoot high-speed video at 120 frames per second at 720p resolution without audio. The video will then play back at 30 frames per second to produce a slow motion effect. Some of the settings for video are a bit weird. For example, you can set the resolution of your video and the level quality which reflects on the bitrate of the video in the menu settings, but to choose the specific frame rate, you have to go to the Super Control panel, and even there you don't have full control over the frame rates, as they have to match with multiplies of the settings from the menu. It has a micro HDMI connector, which lets you output video at 4K for viewing, so you can monitor externally while recording, but I don't think it is a clean signal. It doesn't output raw video via HDMI. It has a maximum recording time of 29 minutes. The maximum file size is 4 gigabytes, so if you record a long video clip, it will be broken down into multiple files. Unlike its predecessor, the EM10 Mk IV, this camera doesn't have movie effects, but it lets you apply art effects when filming. The camera has interval recording for stitching multiple pictures into a video clip or store the images for later conversion to a clip on a computer. The camera has stereo onboard microphones located on the top of the camera, one on the left of the flash and one to the right of it. The camera does not have a microphone jack, and it also doesn't have an audio out jack. It has an onboard speaker, which is located above the menu button. The audio is recorded in stereo mode at 16-bit bit depth and 48 kHz sampling rate. If you are using the onboard microphone to record audio when filming, make sure you switch off the wind noise reduction feature, because it really damages the audio quality of your clip while trying to suppress wind noise. The camera has a number of modes which help the novice photographer learn more about photography and have some fun, such as the scene mode, advanced photo, and art modes. It has 16 art filters, and if you set the mode dial to art, they can be accessed using the shortcut button on the top left part of the camera. You can access these art filters from the menu as well in other modes. The art filters can also be used in video mode. The camera has an advanced photo mode with 9 preset options that help you to discover new techniques and features if you don't want to use the manual mode. For example, it has a panorama mode, so all you have to do is hold down the shutter button, then move the camera horizontally or vertically, just like a smartphone, to create a panorama picture. I recommend holding the phone vertically so that you get a wider view from the ground to the sky. One of the interesting aspects of Olympus cameras is that they provide a lot of tools on the camera for post-processing images which other camera brands don't provide. The camera allows you to enter copyright details to be included in the metadata of pictures. So all your images will be automatically tagged with details that you enter in the settings, such as your name, website, or contact details. You can configure the camera to allow wireless connectivity when the camera is off. This will allow your camera to complete uploading photos even if you have switched off your camera, but it will consume more of the battery when this mode is enabled. You review pictures and videos by pressing the button with the play icon on it. While viewing a photo, you can press the info button to display more information. You can do some editing of photos and videos on the camera. For example, you can trim the beginning or end of a video. And you can also create photos from a frame in a video. The camera is currently not supported for use with Olympus webcam software, so you won't be able to use the camera as a webcam, to my knowledge. Unlike the higher-end models, such as the EM5 and EM1, it does not have weather sealing, it does not have custom settings on the mode dial, it doesn't have Pro Capture mode, which exists in higher-end Olympus cameras. In cameras that support Pro Capture starts shooting the moment you press the shutter button down halfway and captures up to 35 frames prior to the moment the button is pressed down fully. So you have the chance to go back in time to get the exact shot that you want. But this feature doesn't exist on this camera. The camera doesn't have a high resolution mode, which is available in the higher end models. High resolution mode allows the camera sensor to shift, then take multiple pictures and combine them into a high resolution picture with substantially higher quality. This mode is useful for product photography or any still subjects, but this camera doesn't have it. The camera doesn't have phase detect autofocus, but its contrast detect autofocus is really good, although not as fast as the combined phase detect and contrast detect autofocus, which is available in the higher end models. The camera doesn't have a microphone jack or an audio port. In the first version of this camera, you could change the settings for the number of frames taken at each of the sequential shooting modes. That option no longer exists in the Mark IV, so there is less room for customization. The exposure bracketing feature on this camera is limited to either 3 or 5 frames, and there is no option to select how many stops of light those frames should differ. Whereas on the first version of this camera, not only could you go up to 7 frames, but also the exposure could be customized at 1/3 stops. This is the basic manual for this camera. It is exactly 300 pages long, but that's because they have the translation in 33 different languages. The English part of the manual is 11 pages, and out of those 11 pages, only 6 pages make up the instructional part. The other 5 pages contain information about safety precautions, compliance, and various standard certifications. A more detailed instruction manual for this camera exists, which is 186 pages of real content. But to my knowledge, it is only available in an electronic format, which can be downloaded from the Olympus website. It would have been useful to receive a printed version of the detailed instruction manual instead of the basic manual in 33 languages. In the detailed instruction manual, it states that Olympus also provides a function guide on their website, but on the website, a function guide for this camera doesn't exist. This is the Olympus Image Share mobile app. I haven't used this app myself because my phone is running an old version of Android which isn't supported. At the time of this review, the supported operating systems are iOS 11 to 14, iPad OS 13 to 14, and Android 6 to 11. The app allows you to control your camera remotely. You can see the camera's live view on your smartphone screen. You can specify the autofocus point. It lets you control the zoom for electronic zoom lenses. You can release the shutter to take a photo. It lets you adjust the shooting mode, such as manual mode or the art mode. It also lets you change the drive mode to choose between single shot, burst, and self-timer. The app uses both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and it requires scanning a QR code to pair the devices. I don't know how easy the integration is to tag photos with GPS coordinates coming from your phone, but it is mentioned in the documentation, so it can be done. But as I haven't used the app, I can't provide comprehensive information about the app and its features. The camera feels solid and dense. It feels like something that has a high build quality. I don't like the eyelets for attaching the camera strap as they rattle and make noise, which I suspect could be picked up by the microphone when shooting a video, but they can be taken off. I have large hands and this camera is very small, but the good ergonomics of the camera make it less uncomfortable. For example, there's a ridge on the back of the camera that lets my thumb hold the camera in place, and on the front of the camera there is a dip, which is positioned nicely for my finger to be placed there. So I can hold the camera with 2 fingers without having to exert any force, as the camera semi-sits on my 2 fingers. But still, the camera is very small and not very comfortable. The battery door doesn't snap into place. You actually have to lock it into place. The reasons why I bought this camera are: 1, I wanted a small camera with small lenses that is easy to carry around instead of some of my substantially larger cameras which I end up not carrying with me. 2, because I use video recording capabilities of the camera more than the photography features. The image stabilization is one of the features that I wanted. 3, I wanted a camera which provides a tilt screen rather than a flip out screen. 4, also I needed a camera that had a good quality video recording so that I could use it to produce videos for posting online. But because I wanted to shoot overhead videos, I wanted a camera which is really light so that I can mount it anywhere without introducing significant complexity to my setup. The only shortcoming this camera has for this use case is the lack of a 3.5mm microphone jack. I wasn't able to find alternative cameras that could satisfy these requirements at this price point. There are cameras that would outperform this camera in some areas, but would lag behind in other areas such as IBIS or size and weight. I would have preferred it if the camera didn't have an EVF or a flash, as I think the main goal of this camera is portability and lightweight, but I can see why they would include these features in a grab-and-go camera, which is meant to be self-contained. The addition of a microphone port would have been more valuable to me rather than the EVF or flash. I assume it would have been cheaper to include a 3.5mm microphone jack rather than an EVF. Overall, I'm happy with the camera and it serves its intended purpose.